Hi everyone, welcome to Cluster 2 Knowledge Assessment. It's LAO 24246 and my name's Natalie Hull and I'm one of the teachers on the team at TAFE Digital, the Community Services team. So welcome to the session. Okay, so a bit of an overview. What we're going to be doing is we're going to work through the assessment questions and just clarify the questions so that you're really clear about what's being asked of you in terms of completing the questions and the tasks throughout the assessment. And then I'm going to give you some, as we go through, some tips on where to locate the information in the learning content, because students always ask, where do I find the information? Okay, so getting started, what's really important is you will download your assessments. You've already done cluster 1, so you know where to go. You'll go to the assessment tab and you'll download the assessment. Always remember to put in your student number and your student name on the front page of the assessment so that we can identify who's completed the assessment. Where do you find the answers? It's a really good question. The tasks in most assessments will identify the unit they relate to. And so you can see this right here. This is at the start of your assessment, question 1, and right above question 1, it says CHC DIV 001, work with diverse people. So it's telling you that the questions you're being asked throughout this assessment are relating specifically to the unit CHCDIV 001. Okay, so that means you will refer to the learning resource for this subject to be able to find the information to complete your answers. So where do you find the learning resource? Hopefully you've all found them so far. If you've managed to pass your cluster 1 assessments, I'm sure you have. But just a bit of a recap. Of course, it's on the OLS. If you go to the My Courses and then My Units tab at the top of the page and then My Course Progress, you'll select one of your units, and in this case it'll be this unit here, work with diverse people, and then go to the unit overview page. When you get to the unit overview page, you're going to click on Access Your Learning. When that page opens up, it'll bring you to this page here, which says Learning Resources and Assessment Information. And you will have this same page. It'll have different content for each unit, but for every unit, when you go to My Unit and you follow the instructions, you'll come to this learning resource page and you'll always have library guides for every unit. The information on the APA referencing, which is the referencing we use for you to, if you refer to any articles you've read or any research you've done, you need to reference your work. And so you'll use the guideline that's outlined in the APA referencing guide. So please check it out if you haven't already. And then here it says learning resources, and this is where you'll find the course booklets, the online resource for each of the units. So you're going to pick work with diverse people, okay? And this is what the front of the page looks like. So you'll click straight on work with diverse people and you'll open up the learning resource. And always start on the first page. You know, read your learning resource from page 1 through to the end. And when we develop assessments and questions, quite often you're going to find that the questions are going to have some order to them. So just keep working through your learning resources from page 1 through to the end of the learning resource. And this is a really good example because this is actually the start of the learning resource for this unit. And the first question says, what types of diversity might you encounter in your role? And here it is on the very first page of content, and it's listing the types of diversity you're going to encounter. So there you go. That's where you'll find the answers to the very first question. Now, as we work through this presentation, I'm going to pay attention to the questions that I've highlighted in yellow because they're the questions that trip students up. Most of the others are pretty straightforward. As you know, we all interpret information differently and we interpret questions differently. Question 2 is pretty straightforward. For each of these questions, 2, 3, and 4, at the top here, it says refer to pages 6 to 26 in the learning resource. So if you read through this section of the learning resource, you're going to be able to answer these questions correctly. Okay. So question 2 is just asking you what type of information would you need to know about a cultural group in order to work effectively with them. So, what important information about that cultural group, their way of life, what do you need to know about them? But check out page 6 onwards and you'll be able to answer that question. Now, question 3. This question says, how can your attitudes impact your ability to work inclusively with diverse groups of people? And it says, think about workplace behaviours which are not inclusive. For example, not allowing a person to practice their religion or their faith. And so discuss this and then provide 2 examples to demonstrate your understanding. Now, it's wanting you to discuss social perspective and biases. And if you read the case study on page 13, you are going to find the information you need to answer this question. Okay. And so you're going to be considering how, if we have negative biases or we, hold a social perspective about a particular group, what are the types of behaviours that that aren't inclusive, and what transpires as a result of having biases. But read page 13, the case study, and you'll be able to answer those questions. And you'll see on that page one of these examples are listed there, not allowing a person to practice their religion or faith. So question 4. Most people cover this question quite well in terms of providing a definition of cultural awareness, cultural safety, and cultural competence. But quite often people forget to answer the second part of the question. So why are these important in your work? So the best way to go about answering this question, read the learning material and then provide a definition. What is cultural awareness? Provide a definition. What is cultural safety? Provide a definition. What is cultural competence? Provide a definition. And then provide an overall answer of why are they important? Why do you need to know about these? Why are they important when working with diverse groups in the community services sector? So 2 parts to the question. Question 5. Read the case study on page 16 and there's a link at the bottom of the page of that case study, a link to the Beyond Blue resource, which I'm pretty sure takes you to the library guides. But all you need to do is to read that case study, and then at the bottom of the page, you can actually click on the link to the Beyond Blue resource. Please read the resource. Read the case study and you're going to then be able to answer this question. And the question says, give examples of issues affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their engagement with services. So it's asking you to discuss, what are the social issues that are affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? What are the political issues? You know, how have they been affected economically and culturally? And I want you to provide an example against each of these to demonstrate your understanding. And it's asking you to identify the issues affecting them and then why it's a challenge or why there is low engagement with services. You know, what's preventing them from engaging in services in terms of you know, that their lifestyle and how they've been impacted. It says here clearly, this is a good tip. To complete your answer, consider the cultural and the historical issues which have prevented or impacted this group's trust or willingness to engage with mainstream services. But read the case study on page 16 and this great resource, and you'll be able to answer the question. Now, question 6, another tip, pages 11 to 12 in the learning resource. This question, sometimes students forget to provide an example of both. So this question is asking you to identify and describe a state or federal law. Go to page 11 and 12. You are going to find one there and you're going to be able to read about it and you're going to be able to read what the impacts are as well if the law's not followed. Okay, so in your answer, when it says identify, that means provide the name of the law. When it says describe, it means give us a description so that you can demonstrate that you understand what the aim of that law is. You know, what does it aim to protect or who does it aim to protect? Okay, so identify, describe, and then also describe the consequences. You know, what's the impact to people that may be affected? Okay. Part B is asking you to identify and describe an international human rights convention. Read page 11 and 12 and you will be able to identify an international human rights convention. And then once again, describe the impacts or consequences when the convention's not followed. Okay. All right. Questions 7 to 9, you're going to find the content to help you answer the questions on page 37 to 40. Question 7, straightforward. Most students are absolutely fine with this question. It's just asking what are the adverse impacts? You know, what are the impacts that arise from being marginalised or a part of a marginalised group? Okay. Question 8 is asking what resources may you need to work effectively with diverse groups. Now, there are so many resources, okay, and different types of resources, but go to this part of the learning resource and the sorts of answers we're looking for. Resources that relate to perhaps programs or people. For example, I'm going to give you an example straight away. Interpreters. They're a wonderful resource for working with diverse groups, particularly people from non-English speaking background. So look out for that section of the learning resource where it's talking about a range of different people and, you know, resources that can assist you in working with diverse groups. Now, question 9 is asking you to identify influences that may affect a person's attitude towards diversity in Australia. So you just need to think about who's influenced you in your life. I mean, read the learning resource because you'll find the answers right there within those pages. But it's asking you who or what, you know, what institutions, who in your life has influence the way you think, you know, your perspectives about different cultural groups and different people from diverse backgrounds. And then you'll be able to answer the question. Okay, so identify some examples of who and what has impacted or influenced your attitudes. Okay, question 10. This is a research activity where you're asked to go to the library guides. Where do you find the library guides? We had a look at how to get to the learning resource page, where it says step 1, of course. Earlier on in this session, I showed you where to download the learning resource that's going to help you to answer the questions. This is where you access the library guide. So you'll click on this link and it'll bring you to this page. And then it says in this list, key areas of diversity. That's where you need to go. Once you click on key areas of diversity, you'll come to this next page that has a range of great articles and information, books regarding different diverse groups. So you just need to pick one of these groups, choose one, read the articles, get to understand the group and how and the issues that they experience to be able to then answer the next question. Okay, and you need to demonstrate that you have done this research in order to be able to answer the question. So you just need to pick one of the groups. You might research people with mental illness, you might research transgender community, you might research people with a disability. Choose one group. And at the beginning of your answer, make sure you identify the group, because quite often students just go straight into question A and start to talk about how that particular group that they've researched has been marginalised, because this is the question you're being asked. Discuss how this group is marginalised in your community in the following areas of work and life. So make sure you start your answer with, I have chosen to research people with mental health issues. Or, I have researched people with a disability, with a physical disability. So identify the group so the teacher knows who you're talking about. And then part A, you're going to talk about how they've been marginalised. And you need to give examples for each of these areas: politically, socially, economically, and culturally. So remember to address each 4, not just one broad answer, but each of those. Okay, part B of this question says discuss the potential needs of the group. So what are their needs and what are the protective factors? So what do they need in terms of, protecting this group? If you don't understand what protective factors are, go back to your learning resource to page 38. And page 38 has the theory that outlines what protective factors are, so that you've got a good understanding of protective factors. And then it's probably a really good idea to read the learning resource first, understand needs and protective factors, and then, refer to your group and the research so that you can identify their needs. And once again, you need to talk about each of these bullet points. All right, so give some examples, discuss. When it says discuss, it doesn't mean just list some bullet point answers underneath protective factors. It means discuss the protective factors. So, few sentences discussing protective factors and the other areas of potential needs: physical, mental, and emotional, impacts of discrimination or trauma, exclusion, and negative attitudes. Okay, question C, or part C of question 10, says provide information about how the following resources could support individuals and organisations to embrace and respond to this group. So it's saying, Tell us how these resources, so language and cultural interpreters, so resources, language resources, and you'll read all about them in page 30 to 33 in the learning resource. So back to your learning resource, get your head around what language and resources there are, how we can use cultural interpreters to work with people from different diverse backgrounds or cultural groups, and then read about imagery. What is imagery? You need to understand what imagery is. So read about it on page 34. And then when you do your research, you'll be able to discuss, once you understand the particular group, you'll be able to discuss how these resources will support you working with those particular groups. Okay, question 11, 12. This question, in a sense, it's easy because you only need to read the learning resources to understand how our perspectives impact the way we work with others, to understand that we all hold biases and perspectives, and it's an ongoing journey throughout our life to be continually getting my words mixed up, but to be able to continue to reflect and become aware of your biases, because so much of us is unconscious and we hold unconscious biases. So this is getting you to think and reflect on your experiences. So you're going to report in question 11 and 12 on your own personal experiences and reflections. Okay. So question 11 says describe an interpersonal encounter. So an encounter that you've had with another person that has given you, or maybe a group, that has given you a greater appreciation of diversity and inclusiveness. Reflect on this experience and then describe how it may contribute to you having better workplace practices and professional relationships. Okay, so think about your life. And when have you met someone from a different, diverse group that's made you think differently and made you respond differently? So, for example, you may have had an encounter with a homeless person, and before that encounter, you may have held a whole lot of different beliefs about the homeless community, or why someone is homeless. But then perhaps you've had this interaction with a homeless person that's really challenged your belief system, and so you've changed your way of thinking, and then now you're going to be able to bring that into your work in community services, and to ensure that you have better relationships with people, better relationships with clients. Or it might be, you met someone from a different cultural background and you held a belief about, Jewish people, or Muslims, or Lebanese men. And then you've met somebody. You've met you worked with a man who was from a Lebanese background, who was completely different to this belief that you've taken on, that's untrue. It's a bias, and then now through this interaction, you have different beliefs and ideas about that person, and for the better. So we want to know about that. That's what you need to report on. Question 12 is asking you to reflect on your own perspectives on diversity. And it says 200 to 400 words. So, we're asking you to really um, consider the perspectives you have today. So it says, in your answer, identify and reflect on your social perspectives and biases. So what you need to do to be able to answer this question is think about how you've grown up, or the life experiences that you've had, Perhaps you grew up in a Catholic family, or, involved in the Catholic faith, and you've never experienced someone from the gay community before. So once again, you've noticed and identified that, um, through growing up, you held some particular perspectives about a certain group of people. And so reflect back, think about how you developed those perspectives. You may think very differently about that group today, but this is you mapping that experience. So sometimes people will talk about they grew up with a very limited experience of having access to different cultural groups. And then, in their early 20s, they went traveling overseas and to different countries, and then started to experience culture and completely changed and shifted their views and ideas that they had about that particular cultural group that they may have developed in their own family or through their education. So that's what we want you to identify and discuss. And then there's 3 parts to this question. It says identify your limitations in self-awareness and social awareness. So now we're asking you, what's a particular group that you have limited understanding or awareness of? And perhaps you've never experienced anyone from the transgender community, or perhaps you've never met, a Japanese person. What particular cultural group do you need to learn more about? Do you need to do some research on to strengthen your understanding of that group? So, part 2 of this question, you need to identify the limitations, and then identify. It says identify and act on ways to improve your social awareness and your self-awareness and social awareness. So, what kind of training or what kind of strategies could you use to now broaden your understanding and knowledge about that particular group, so that when you're working in community services, you're going to be able to work effectively with that group? Okay, so 3 parts to that question. Make sure you answer each part of the question, otherwise you'll be asked to resubmit your questions. Okay, question 13 says, describe 3 different strategies an organisation or a worker can utilise to recognise, value and respect the needs of people from diverse social and cultural backgrounds. For example, describe appropriate communication techniques. This is a tip in answering this question, okay? Go to page 37 to 39, read the theory that relates to this question, and then consider 3 different strategies, thinking about different communication techniques that you could employ to be able to recognise, value and respect the needs of people from diverse social and cultural backgrounds. So, how can you communicate with them in an effective way? And identify 3 strategies. And there's a lot of strategies in this particular section of the learning resource. Okay, part 2 is pretty straightforward. You need to go to Indigo Community Services and Health Hub, and it outlines here exactly where to find the information to answer the first question. But in your assessment, when you open it, straight from the assessment tab, you should be able to click on the Indigo link that's in the assessment that will take you directly to Indigo. And Indigo is a website. It's a community organisation that we've created so that you can complete your assessments. So it's a simulated workplace. So question 1 says, provide a brief summary of the services and programs offered by Indigo. Refer to the services and programs information available under policies and procedures. Go to the Indigo website, look for the tab on the website that says policies and procedures. Then it says you will find a policy. So under policies and procedures, you will find the policy within the policies and procedures folder named services and programs information. So policies and procedures tab, look for this particular document, services and programs information. And when you open it up, it's like a brochure, and it will list all the different services in Indigo. What you need to do is provide one, the name of the services. So there's a range of them. So list first the name of the service and then provide a brief summary. So, you know, Indigo has a youth service. What's the name of the youth service and what does that service offer? So you might be writing a sentence against each of the services. Okay, so the name and a brief summary. Questions 2 to 5, very straightforward. Students normally blitz these questions. You're just needing to read the different policies to be able to answer the questions. Question 2, you'll be using the resource that you used in question 1, the services and program information, because you're going to list a couple of other services that Indigo offers as well. Or, you know, go back to the home page on Indigo and you'll notice some other services. Question 3 says read through the service exit policy. So you need to go back to that policy tab on Indigo, find the service user exit policy, and actually this might even be a direct link in your assessment. But you just need to read through the policy, make sure you understand it, and then describe the situations that could lead to a client being exited from the service. It says here provide at least 3 situations. So 3 or more situations, but a minimum of 3 to answer this correctly. Question 4, straightforward, read about exit planning and then just provide a definition. You know, a definition of exit planning is, and describe exit planning. And then question 5, you just need to access the records management policy on Indigo. Okay, and it says provide a summary of Indigo's storage procedures for both hard copy and electronic copies. So read that policy and provide a summary of how hard copy documents are stored and the procedures for storing electronic documents. And once you get to that task, you have completed the assessment, I'm pretty sure. Yes, you have. So I hope that has been helpful to you. If once you get started on the assessment, if you get stuck at any point, you know, even after this session today, if you just want to clarify one of the questions a little further, by all means, either send an email direct to our inbox. This is the address here, or pick up the phone and ring through and ask to speak to a teacher, and we can help discuss the question just to ensure that that it's clear and you're able to complete the question and complete the assessment. Okay, thanks for joining me today. All the best in getting your assessment submitted.